Welcome to Stone Cold Stros. I'm Brandon Strange with Charlie Palillo and Josh Jordan. You can find them on X at Palillo and at Josh Jordan 975, and you can read their blogs covering all things Houston sports over on our flagship site, sportsmap.com. On today's episode, is Cam Smith making the big league club becoming more of a reality by the day? Arrighetti's secret new pitch is out. Will that be the tool that helps him make a Hunter Brown-sized step forward? We'll talk about all that and more. Just a reminder to please hit like on the video, subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications so you know as soon as new content drops. And if you're on the go, we're on all your favorite podcast apps. Just search Stone Cold Stros. Guys, on our last episode, we spoke about the different avenues in which new Astros prospect phenom Cam Smith could play his way onto this roster. Now, how good of a spring has he had with just 2.5 weeks remaining? You ask? Well, how about the co-lead in runs, hits, triples, and homers, and the outright leader in total bases and RBI? That's as of this recording and obviously subject to change. But the real opportunity and need on this team is clearly the outfield. And we've said before that Smith's natural position is third, but his prospect profile does grade him out potentially to be a right fielder. And since that's the most compelling area of competition within the organization currently, we questioned if right field would be the place in which Cam would break in. Well, per Ari Alexander, in late January, Dana Brown met with Smith and told him that he wanted him to battle for that right field job. Now, if Cam Smith were to somehow make this team sooner than later, will it have more to do with Smith's tremendous upside or the lack of faith in McCormick and the other outfield options?
More the lack of belief in McCormick, but blended with Cam Smith as the obvious number one Astros prospect from the Tucker trade. Clearly way ahead of Bryce Matthews, way ahead of Jacob Melton. It's still a fairly trivial sample size of plate appearances, but make hay with the opportunities that you get. Cam Smith certainly has done that. McCormick, also a trivial sample size of spring training playing time, but he's looked like 2024 Chas McCormick for the most part, and that's not a good thing. Ideally, they certainly would like him to get some outfield experience racked up in the minor leagues, along with, as we discussed previously, he's barely had playing time above single A, not unprecedented for that sort of leap. But if McCormick continues to hit in the low ones, I mean, Cam has plunged below 500. Is he already failing? It's just at bare minimum. And if you're an Astros fan, I think this is what you really hold on to firmly. The door is open for Cam Smith to get to the major leagues by the middle of this season at age 22. If it happens to come as soon as opening day, I have no problem with it, but that would be more an indictment of McCormick.
I'm just kind of confused by the timeline there. If Dana Brown told him he wanted him to compete for the right field job in January, why did they just start working him out with the outfielders last week? You know, that's where I'm kind of like, it seems a little peculiar to me if that was always the plan. Of course, maybe things changed as Cam Smith was better than expected and Chas McCormick has continued to struggle. But if the thought was going to be right field for him anyway, might as well get him out there taking reps at both positions, in my opinion. But hey, I'm not the one that's the general manager of the Astros, so I'll leave it there. But yeah, it's a big deal. And in watching just the game this week, watching Jake Myers make some incredible plays in the outfield, some dives and him covering in the gaps, it just looks like they'd be kind of crazy to get away from him, even if, you know, say Jake continues not to hit and Cam Smith is great in right field. My thinking kind of was maybe if Chas is hitting, Chas could go to center field, and then you've got Smith and Chas and Altuve, and that would be a better offensive outfield if Chas can kind of bounce back. But as I think about it and I watch some of these games, Myers just looks so good in center field. I don't know how they can get away from his defense if they're going to have two guys that are possibly liabilities in the outfield. But good problem to have for the Astros. Hopefully Chas starts hitting and Cam and him are kind of pushing each other through the rest of camp. That would be ideal. The more guys that can hit and give you more options, the better.
We watched Altuve struggle in the outfield on Thursday with the ball hit to the wall. Now, combine that with the fact that Smith has never played right field up to this point in a game. That doesn't sound like a team that prioritizes defense the way that Houston does. But at what point does Houston have to make that move and hope that what Smith lacks in defense, he can make up for in offensive production?
Right field and left field are more quote unquote offensive positions than defensive positions. I mean, in Astros history, Carlos Lee played left field on a full-time basis for a while because he was a 30 homer, 100 RBI, 300 hitting type of guy. But when you fancy yourself a contender and playing October baseball when the margins are smaller, you don't want to have a bad defensive outfield. Altuve is going to have his struggles, height related, arm related, experience related. I don't expect him to embarrass himself out there, but he's not going to be a plus left fielder. There's no reason to believe Cam Smith would be a plus right fielder. He's not going to hold a candle defensively to what Kyle Tucker has given him out there in recent years. So it's not as if it's an embarrassment of riches situation. It was an embarrassment at 2 of the 3 outfield spots with McCormick and Myers. Offensively, Myers, as weak as he was better than McCormick. So there is no way McCormick is going to challenge Myers for the center field spot. But if Cam Smith is on the roster, it's not going to be as a platoon player. You're not going to just be in there against left-handed pitching. Cam Smith's still very young in his career. They're going to want everyday playing time because, wow, look at this guy rake at the major league level, or to get the reps, whether OJT in the big leagues or AA, AAA, wherever he would be in the minor leagues. If Cam Smith is on the roster, that also increases the number squeeze. They can't just send Chas McCormick to the minors without paying him his $3.4 million salary. Right? McCormick's guaranteed that money if the Astros release him. You can't carry Brandon Rogers, Dubon, Caratini, Zach DeCenzo, Cam Smith, and Ben Gamel. If you're playing 2 inferior defensive outfielders, Gamel or McCormick, you're going to want to have available as a defensive replacement late innings. Would Altuve then go from left field to second base to keep his bat in the lineup if it's a 1-run game? Joe Espada is going to have to work through this stuff, but for openers, it's who is on the 26. But if Cam Smith tapers off much this next week or so, I would still guess he's ticketed for the minors to start the season. But if he mashes down there, it shouldn't be for long, barring a major Chaz renaissance.
Yeah, you mentioned that play that Altuve had trouble with, Brandon, on Thursday. It was great that he had Myers there to back him up because it almost looked like Altuve maybe thought the ball got over the wall for a second, but it didn't. It kicked away, and he didn't really make any effort to go get it. Luckily, Jake Myers was there to grab it. Myers made a great diving play in that same game. So I think Myers is going to be important there. And the other thing to go with McCormick is, yes, you're right. He gives you a better defense in theory than if you had Cam Smith in right field. But keep in mind, McCormick's got a weak arm. And so he may be able to track stuff down, and that's all well and good. But, if you're talking about just your best defense and your arms in the outfield are Altuve, Myers, and McCormick, nobody's excited about that. So some of the defense is better with those guys, but some of it is also a weakness. And then I also point out, as far as playing these guys, and they're not going to get better if they don't play. Whether you're talking about Cam Smith in right field, Altuve left field, they're not going to get better at these positions unless they're out there getting regular reps. So it might be a thing where, they might struggle early on, mid through the season, but as the season gains momentum and as you get closer to the playoffs, maybe these guys are a lot more comfortable in their positions and they've improved, and your outfield defense is actually quite a bit better than when you started the season.
The grab your rabbit's feet and 4-leaf clover Astros fan case scenario on this is that Cam Smith is pure phenom. We've talked in recent weeks, the very high percentage of major league studs who are in the big leagues when they're 22, younger than that in many cases. I mean, just think of the most breathtaking talents in Major League Baseball right now. Juan Soto, Gunnar Henderson, Bobby Witt Jr., all 21 years of age as big leaguers at the oldest. So if Cam Smith is that level of wow or remotely close to it, I don't mean in current production to those guys, but that he belongs in the big leagues and he's carrying his weight. Well, Then you have Jacob Melton progressing to where at least he's an alternative. If Myers just continues to flail about offensively, Chas McCormick is done. And then you'd get another good center fielder. I don't know that he numbers project the way Myers does defensively, but Jacob Melton is considered a solid to good defensive center fielder. And absolutely, and I don't mean this as damning with faint praise, absolutely a better throwing arm than Jake Myers. So there's definitely some hope and good fortune rather than, oh, the Astros have so many bets covering the roulette wheel. How can it not work out for them? No, the downside is evident.
Oh, we touched on it before. Kyle Tucker, in addition to missing a big chunk of time with that leg fracture, also took a step back in his defense. Now, his arm and his bat obviously were the great equalizers in that equation, but you can suffer or you can withstand a little bit of a defensive setback at that position, as Charlie said, because that is a more of a put an offensive guy in that place. Just a quick message. If you're interested in advertising your service or product on this show, you can contact our friends on the sales team at houston.sportsmap.com/advertise. The link is also in our description. Now let's get to some injury updates. Christian Walker rehabbing the sore oblique. He took some BP in the cage. They'll monitor that situation and see how he responds. Caleb Ort, also of a sore oblique. He threw 15 pitches, so he continues to make his way back. For the guys making their way back from surgery, Luis Garcia slated for a bullpen session this weekend, and it looks like next week, Lance McCullers Jr. will actually get into his first live game. So my fingers are so crossed so hard for those guys that I might require flexor tendon surgery. But let's stay on pitching because we've covered this, and I think it was the episode before last, but Spencer Arrighetti teased a new pitch. We now have confirmation that it is a two-seam sinker. I think we actually saw it in use on Thursday. It's hard to tell in spring without the stat track, but we saw what the sinker did for Hunter Brown's game. There are different ways, to use it, and there's obviously, between Brown and Arrighetti, they have two different styles. But do you think that pitch could help Arrighetti enjoy that same step forward or a similar step forward that we saw Brown take in his development last season?
Simplistic answer is it couldn't hurt. But Arrighetti made his own leap the second half of last season. Or let's call it post All-Star break last season. ERA nearly 5 before the break, 3.18 after it. For Arrighetti, foremost, it's about command. Right? He doesn't have blow you away heat, but he has enough, and he has enough in his arsenal to pitch and win if the command is there. The two issues that he had were walks and home runs. Not to the extent with the gopher ball that Hayden Wesneski has had, the guy behind Spencer in the rotation at this point has had. But if you walk a guy, walk two guys, and give up the home run, well, that's how big innings can cost you ball games. Arrighetti, after the All-Star break, his walk rate dropped 40% plus from where it was the first half of the season. The All-Star break's well after the midway point, but they call it first half, second half. If Arrighetti basically picks up where he left off, he's going to be a top third to top quarter, maybe higher than that, number 4 starter. If we wanted to have our own mini draft on the Astros starting pitchers, right? Who do you get for 2025 among Framber, Hunter Brown, Ronel Blanco, Spencer Arrighetti? If I had the first pick and took Framber, and you had the second pick and wanted to be a little daring and take Spencer Arrighetti over Hunter Brown, I'd say, well, not the way that I would go, but not absolutely absurd. Arrighetti has winning major league stuff if it's well enough harnessed, and he displayed over about 2 months sufficient progress. If he adds one more weapon to that with command, hey, this is a guy who, given good offense and solid defense, should absolutely be a 12 to 14 game winner.
Yeah, Spencer talked about this with the foul territory guys, that he was so impressed with how that worked for Hunter Brown because Hunter Brown gets a lot of ground balls, and Spencer Arrighetti he's a fly ball pitcher. A lot of fly balls, a lot of strikeouts. He wanted to find a pitch that could maybe get him some quicker outs on the ground. And so, it makes sense. Go with the two-seamer, go with the sinker there. So he's also a guy that has trouble finishing batters off. I was just watching him on Thursday, and batters seem to, just get a little foul ball. A lot of times he has trouble putting them away. He was over 50 pitches in his first 3 innings on Thursday. So it just shows you he's still a guy that he needs a lot of pitches to finish guys off. So if you work in some of those two-seamers and you get a couple quick outs on some ground balls, maybe that could be something that could get him to be able to go a little deeper into ball games. And Chandler Rome had a pretty cool article, I thought, about Arrighetti, and they talked about his four-seamer and that guys slugged over 500 against his four-seam fastball last year. And that was about 40% of his arsenal. So if you can start to, smooth that out a little bit, work in the two-seamer, and that's the other thing too. If a guy's guessing fastball and you only throw a four-seamer, it's a little easier for them to be on it. Whereas if you throw 2 different fastballs, well, maybe the sinker's a couple miles an hour slower and the movement's a little different on this one. So maybe even if you guess fastball, perhaps you guess the wrong fastball and you're not able to barrel it up. So it makes a lot of sense to me. What kind of threw me off about him saying it was a new pitch is I looked at his Baseball Savant page. He threw a whopping 10 two-seam sinkers last year. So it's not like he hasn't done a little bit with it, but obviously 10 pitches over a whole season is next to nothing. That's why I thought maybe he was talking about a splitter, like something we've never seen him throw before. But perhaps it's a different two-seamer. Maybe he went up to Hunter Brown, was like, how do you hold this thing? Maybe that's kind of it, that he's retooling a sinker and just looking to use it a little more. I think it's great because what's the downside? If it doesn't work out and the sinker's not helping you, you can always just go back to being a primarily four-seam fastball guy.
It all tethers to command. Josh had talked about the four-seamer getting pummeled to a better than 500 slugging percentage. Right? Command isn't just not walking guys. The four-seamer, you want that riding at the very top of the zone, a little bit above, but not so far above that a hitter will lay off of it. Well, if you're wild a little bit lower, it's just sitting there in a zone with a sign that says, hit me hard. And batters did. So I just think Arrighetti is just polishing it up with experience. Very few pitchers throw 5, 6 on a regular basis. Yu Darvish famously has. But Arrighetti tracked very well the second half of the season. If he can enhance that, fine. But if he decides to junk the two-seamer, it shouldn't be debilitating to his chances to be a real solid upper middle rotation starting pitcher.
Charlie, you mentioned some of the tough decisions that this team has given the financial implications that are tied to them. And at this point, there are more candidates than there are job openings. Moving Altuve to left, which at this point, look, unless Jose has a terrible season at that position, they're going to stick with that. So that opens up second base as the biggest question mark. With just over a couple weeks left in spring, do you guys have any strong opinions on who you think will get the majority of reps at second coming into the season?
I think it sets up as Dubon initially, because it's not as if Rogers or Guillorme or DeCenzo, I don't think he's had any playing time at second base, or if so minimal, that no one has gotten a consistent enough look or done anything eye-opening to say, hey, this is our guy. So Dubon, and certainly if Cam Smith's the right fielder, Dubon's super utility, defensive replacement, he may wind up out there, but forget about starting. Right? If Cam Smith makes the big league team, he's in there every day. Jake Myers against maybe some tough righties is going to be in there every day. Altuve probably 3/4 of the time is going to be in left field when he's not. Yordan is going to want to taste. So, we need to conserve Dubon for the super utility role. No, if they deem him their best option at second base, then he should be the guy. But he's a poor offensive player. That he's having a poor spring offensively should not surprise, should not disappoint, other than it kind of fits the profile of his career. But someone has to hit ninth. It's just you'd prefer that to be Myers or McCormick at this point. But if you have someone who you think is going to be worse, again, that bottom third of the order has sinkhole potential.
I think if you ask the Astros, they'd like it to be Bryce Matthews eventually. He went back down to the minors. He was sent down and to minor league camp. And Espada said he thinks second base is, where he's going to find comfort and be an above average defender. So I think that's their hope because, Jeremy Pena is expected to be here for the next several years. There's no reason for him to be at short, and you have third base covered too. They could use a good defensive second baseman that has some pop, but he feels like he's a little far away. So if we're looking at just right now, with Brendan Rodgers, I think is a guy that obviously I don't think they have him ticketed for the top position because they had a split squad game on Thursday. Dubon was your starting second baseman with your Paredes and your Altuve and your Yordan. So it seems like kind of Dubon right now is the A option at second base, where Rodgers was with the other team playing with McCormick and those guys on Thursday. But Rodgers is a guy where I like the pop and that ground rule double he had the other day. To me, it's just kind of an unknown because he hasn't played here before. I know about all the stuff in Colorado, and you'd say, oh, his power was because of that, and then he'd probably say, well, breaking balls perform differently in Colorado, so I think that'll help me being in a more consistent place in Houston, where breaking balls will work a little more consistently as they do across MLB. But he's just a guy. I know you're going to have to pay him. There's nothing you're just oozing with this excitement about, but maybe he can give you a little more than Dubon with the bat. And I think they're going to really need that this year.
They only owe Gamble $200,000 if they decide to cut him. It's another $1 million if he makes the squad, because if Rodgers is here and Cam Smith is here, that's a couple of guys who 2 months ago you'd be thinking, yeah, they're probably on the roster, who cannot be. And they would come among Gamble, Singleton, and DeCenzo.
And just getting back to Bryce, it's, he profiles as another guy who's a better athlete than he is a hitter at this point in his development. We've discussed that there are only so many positions in which you can have these defensive specialists and not get offensive production out of. So hopefully he develops. But to Charlie's overall point about positions in which you can prioritize that, second base is one of those that's really important defensively. So it would behoove him to definitely make a name for himself and carve a place out for himself on this team at that position. But he's really going to have to be able to do more with the stuff that's besides the fastball, because that stuff he can hit. It's the breaking stuff that he struggles with. Join the club. One last reminder, if you're watching on YouTube and you haven't yet, be sure to hit like on the video. And if you listen on podcast apps like Apple or Spotify, please consider giving us a 5-star rating. Let us know in the comments what you're excited to see from this team this season. Our next episode is going to drop on Monday, so make sure you subscribe to the channel. On this channel, Sports Map Houston, and our other channel, Sports Map Texans. We just dropped a bonus episode on that channel, so go check that out, reacting to everything going on with the trades for Houston. Thanks for listening. For Charlie and Josh, I'm Brandon saying so long, and until next time, go Stros!